All right, good Saturday evening, everybody, and welcome into the Auburn Postgame Show brought to you by Medical Properties Trust. He's Matt Scalisi. I'm Simone Eli. A difficult one here for the Tigers, fresh off a loss to Penn State on the road, a top 22 matchup, if you will. Auburn ranked 22nd in the country, Penn State top 10 in the country. 28-20, the final. The Tigers fall in what I would consider a tough one, a disappointing one from a hopeful standpoint, not necessarily an expectation standpoint, Matt, but from the hopes of what fans could have seen here walking away from State College with a win. Not exactly how it went down for the Tigers.
No, I think it was I think part of what makes a game like this so tough to swallow, like you said, is it felt within reach. And it felt like there were times, frankly, when Auburn was in control of the game.
Yeah.
And, I think a game like this can be tough on your psyche and on your emotions afterwards, because you think back at this handful of moments where if it had just gone the other way, this one moment, the whole game might have turned out differently. So that's really tough to swallow. But I don't know that you can necessarily – I don't know that I would recommend ever looking back at a game that way, because I think you have to always look at ultimately what were the trends that if you'd fixed this, if you'd played better in this area, the little individual moments and plays wouldn't have mattered, because ultimately that's going to happen in football. There's going to be crazy stuff that happens that you can't predict, and you have to overcome it. But I are there areas in this game where I think that Auburn was capable of doing better than they did overall over the course of the whole game? I do. And I think those are probably the areas that are more productive to look at and to focus on. You're going to hear people talk about officiating. You're going to hear people talk about, maybe individual mistakes that were made, bad execution on individual plays.
Sure.
But to me, it's kind of the bigger picture stuff that you actually can have some control over when they go back to practice this week. That's the stuff that's probably a little bit more worth focusing on, in my opinion.
Yeah, a lot of comments we're getting here. Some we probably can't show. A lot of frustration, and we get it.
Keep it clean, and I'll put you on screen. How about that?
No doubt. Of course, fans are frustrated, and I think anyone that watched the game that has eyes, that's probably not an Alabama fan, looked at that and thought there were some frustrating moments down the stretch. Maybe when it comes to play calling, none of us sit here and make multiple millions of dollars a year to make play calls. But I think that a lot of folks, just to kind of address the elephant in the room, would have loved to see Auburn run the ball on that 4th and 2 situation with the potential to tie the game had they, of course, scored and then converted a 2-point conversion. Seemed a little bit frustrating in that moment, but like you said, Matt, it's hard to pinpoint one play because you really do have to look at the whole body of work. There was a lot of things that maybe were questionable. There were times where, Auburn struggled on both sides of the ball. Bo Nix ends the day 21 of 37 for 185 and no touchdown passes. I think one bright spot that we can talk about, at least that's pretty significant, I would say, is Auburn's rushing game. At the end of the day, Tank Bigsby and Jarquez Hunter are two of the best backs, I think, in the SEC, for sure.
I think so, and they looked like it today too. That is one of the things that I think is probably most frustrating for fans about this game is there was an area of this game where Auburn consistently played really well, and that was running the ball. And I think it's very easy for all of us out here to look at it and say, why didn't they just run the ball more? I think that's probably a fair criticism, and I think it probably will be something that Mike Bobo and Brian Harsin have to address and talk about.
Yeah.
But I do think it's important to remember that they're not every single snap in the run game was a positive gain. Yeah. And defenses change. Defenses shift what they're doing. At some point, Penn State was adjusting and trying to force Auburn to throw the ball more. And I think that the place, obviously, in this game where people are going to be most questioning of the decision to not run the ball is that 4th down play late in the game. Again, it's natural to focus on individual plays, but you're running the ball so well. And they go away from it at a moment where you only need 2 yards.
Mm-hmm.
Look, I'm not coaching this team. They don't want me to coach this team. But if I had that roster and I wanted to get 2 yards tonight, I'm probably going to run the ball with Tank Bigsby. I think Tank wanted the ball. Holly Rose said after the game that there were some players that were visibly unhappy with the play call.
Sure.
And again, these are things that come up when you lose a game. I think I said it on one of our post-game shows, Simone, that your first real moment, the first time that Brian Harsin was going to really become the head coach at Auburn was the first night that he lost a game. And that's happening right now. People are going to question some of the things he did and some of the decisions he made. And he's got to respond to that. He doesn't have to respond to it in a press conference. He has to make changes, and he has to convince everybody from the players to the fans that he has an answer and that he's going to learn from this and make the team better. And we'll see. We will learn a lot going from here about how this coaching staff responds to this game.
Yes, we certainly will. It's easy to look at the offensive side of the ball. Let's talk about the defensive side of the ball. A bright spot, in my opinion, was the rushing defense. Giving up just 84 yards on the ground. We know that to be successful in the SEC, you have to be able to stop the run. Auburn has been pretty impressive throughout the years at stopping the run. I think today was very telling. On the other side of that, Sean Clifford looked like he could go be the Heisman Trophy winner after that performance. The Penn State quarterback, 28 of 32 for 280 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's a pretty impressive stat line. Only 4 incompletions throughout the entire night, Matt.
Yeah, I think if I was going to fault Auburn's defense for any part of this, and I think it is important to give credit to Sean Clifford and Penn State's offense. I think they had a great game plan. They honestly emptied out the bag of tricks for this game, which should be in some ways a compliment to Auburn. Auburn should feel pretty good about the fact that Penn State had to pull a lot of goofy stuff out to win this game. So they didn't think it was going to be easy, and they didn't just come out here and run it down Auburn's throat. They had to get creative about it, and they were successful at it. And they needed their quarterback to play an extremely efficient game where he took care of the ball, and he did that tonight. And sometimes that's just going to happen. He's an experienced guy that didn't make any mistakes tonight. And but if I'm going to be critical of Auburn's defense at all, I'm surprised that they were not able to get more pressure on Sean Clifford tonight. I really thought that Auburn's defensive line would be a bigger factor in this game than they were. I think I saw them in the backfield a good amount, and I'm very curious to see kind of what it looks like rewatching the game and how many times did they just pressure him and Sean Clifford made the play anyway. But to me, it didn't feel like Sean Clifford was harassed a lot. It didn't feel like he was having to throw under pressure a lot. And that is a disappointment to me, just because I thought Auburn's front seven would be a bigger factor.
Sure. And when you translate that to what things could look like in the SEC, when it really, really matters, I mean, there are some pretty talented quarterbacks in the Southeastern Conference. And if they have the amount of time that they have to make decisions, to go through progressions, that could get really, really rough for Auburn down the stretch. So Auburn hasn't won a top 10 road game since 2014. That streak continues with the loss to Penn State. How much, in your opinion, Matt, did the atmosphere play a role in the difficulty level when it comes to communication? Because we have to remember that this is Brian Harsin's 3rd game coaching Auburn, this Auburn team. The first ever on the road in an atmosphere that was considered a hostile environment, very, very loud. I mean, all those things play a role in communicating throughout the offense. That has to be a factor here.
I do think it was a factor in the game, but, there was a lot made throughout the week about the whiteout and the atmosphere at Penn State and how Auburn has never seen anything like this before. I don't know that I felt that it was that it was the determining factor in the game. I mean, there were communication issues at times for Auburn's offense, I think, but we watched Alabama, Florida earlier today. And that was a situation where the atmosphere truly did disrupt the visiting team, and I think made a big impact on the game. I would say less so tonight. And I mean, credit to Auburn for that, because I do think it was probably really loud there. I think that
Sure.
Penn State atmosphere was really rocking, but I don't think Auburn lost this game because of the atmosphere or the pressure from the crowd. I really think it did just come more down to, I mean, this was a very evenly matched game.
Yeah.
I think that the Penn State coaching staff did a little bit better job than the Auburn staff, and I think also that at the line of scrimmage, Penn State probably did just a little bit more than Auburn did to dominate in the trenches, which is what most games come down to. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I honestly was pretty impressed with how Auburn handled the crowd noise.
Yeah, I really like this comment you have up right here from Kenneth Red. That was a big game changer moment, and I think a lot of Auburn fans were like, "What is this?" Now, is that why they lost the game? Not necessarily, but to come out in a situation and run a trick play like that. Again, I'm not a coach. I don't make a bunch of money. I'm not trying to act like I am. We can all sit here and, question coaches. I understand that that's not something I necessarily want to do, but not something I love to see there, causes the turnover. It's just the momentum shift. Momentum is a huge thing, especially on the road. And when it's going against you, it's going against you. And it's very, very difficult to overcome that.
I think that was an extremely unfortunate play call and execution of the play call and moment for it to happen. And in a close game, like I said, when you have a game this close, there are little things haunt you and stick with you, and that's going to be one that haunts Auburn. I think Kobe Hudson would like that one back. I think Mike Bobo would like that one back. I don't like that call in that situation, especially when you look at the very next drive. Yeah. Auburn just physically dominated Penn State and drove the ball down the field. So they had the ability to do that in that moment. Mm-hmm. And instead, you get a little bit too cute and it blows up on you. So that is something that I think will stick in a lot of people's memories about this game, unfortunately.
Yeah, really nice comment we got right here. Auburn played disciplined, well-conditioned, and with fight. And I will say this, there are moments that there was a lot of discipline. Auburn did look like they were in good shape, not a bunch of guys, looking to get to the sideline or anything like that. I think that it takes time to completely change the culture. And there's a lot of things that Brian Harsin is trying to get guys to unlearn almost. And so little things like this eventually pay off when it comes to wins down the road. Matt, not looking for any moral victories. I know there's frustration in the comments and throughout the Auburn fan base right now, but when you're looking at positives, I felt like the effort level at every level was there from this team.
I think so. I mean, look, they had a shot. They still had a shot to tie this game on the last drive of the game. So they never quit in this game. They never looked like they weren't in it. They never looked mentally defeated in this game. Mm-hmm. I just think this was a tough matchup for them. I think talent-wise, this was a pretty even game. And I do think that there are some areas of the team where they need better performance from the guys they have. They need better guys, frankly. Yeah. I think a lot of folks are going to point the finger at Bo Nix. He's an easy target, and I think he made some mistakes tonight, but he definitely is not the only person to blame. He also made a lot of really positive plays tonight. Yeah. I thought he ran the ball really well. I thought
he did. Yeah.
Yeah, and mostly didn't seem to get rattled on the road, which is something that we've criticized him for in the past. But I think that this wide receiver group is not great. Frankly, I'll just say it like it is. I don't think this is an elite wide receiver group, and I don't think they made enough plays for their quarterback tonight. Yeah. Not to say they can't get better at that as the season goes on, but they don't look like it so far. Yeah, I think the offensive line is not going to be one of the best in the SEC, but I think they mostly played pretty well tonight. Mm-hmm. So I just think talent-wise, this program isn't where they need it to be to compete at an elite level, and that's not something that Brian Harsin can fix this year. It's gonna have to be something that he fixes over multiple years. But as you pointed out, there are also all kinds of just tendencies in this team that you can't get rid of overnight.
There were moments, though, that made me wonder, okay, not is Harsin going to make a change at quarterback. Okay, I'm not during this game. That's not what I was thinking 3 weeks into the season in their first road environment. But what I was thinking was Brian Harsin brought in a guy like TJ Finley for a reason. And in my opinion, that reason wasn't just to push Bo Nix. In my opinion, that reason is to bring a different dynamic to that quarterback room and potentially have another option should he have to go that route or choose to go that route at some point. Again, I'm not sitting here asking for Bo Nix's head. There are times where he struggled. It was a road game, a tough environment, a new offense. I mean, check all the boxes for the things against the guy, but I would not be surprised if at some point Harsin decides to look elsewhere and just open things up a little bit, see what else is there. I don't think it's a terrible idea. He's a first-year coach. He can do whatever the heck he wants to do. Look at Rob Passy. He says, go with Finley. I'm ready. I think some folks will like that. And again, like you said, Bo Nix is an easy target. It's his third year starting. We've seen him at the highest of highs. We've seen him at the lowest of lows leading this Auburn offense. But I'm not saying you're ready for a change immediately, but I think that Brian Harsin made the roster moves that he did in the offseason for a reason. I'll leave it at that.
I definitely think that it would have been interesting to see how it would affect the offense to make a change. I do think you can get in the weeds on having a 2-quarterback system pretty quickly, and it can create all kinds of other issues.
Bo couldn't do a 2-quarterback system. Bo could not do a 2-quarterback system. He does not have it up here to do a 2-quarterback system. That guy has to either be the guy or not be the guy and know where he stands. But there's no chance that he could be doing a 2-quarterback system.
I think it would be tough. I think it would be interesting to see if there was some kind of special package where Finley comes in for almost a change of pace type situation. What would that look like? Yeah. How would it affect things?
Yeah.
But again, I also understand why we didn't see something like that tonight, because I think mostly I do think Auburn's offense, when it was going well, was good enough to win this game. I think there were just a few moments here and there where negative plays derailed drives, and those are the kinds of things that I think can be improved upon. You can remove those things from the equation with a lot of work and a lot of practice and study and mental discipline. But it's still such a big part of who this team is. They have. I think it's a big part of why they lost some games they shouldn't have lost the last few years. And I think it's not something you can just instantly coach out of these guys.
No doubt. So Auburn at this point, Matt, in your opinion, where do the Tigers go? When you're going home, you're going to look at the film as they always do. If there's one thing, maybe two things that stick out to you the most that Harsin is maybe harping on, looking at, wishing he had back, what is it?
Yeah, I do think strategy on the offensive side, play calling, I think needs to be looked at. I think they need to figure out what the identity of this offense is, because there were some things they did extremely well tonight, and there were some things that no matter how many times they tried them, just didn't really go that well. So I think there needs to be some more work put into establishing the identity of this offense. I think probably defensively, they're going to need to come up with some answers when they play more physical teams, because I think that's part of what happened tonight too. I think Penn State came out there with some big bodies, and it wasn't as easy as the first two games have been for Auburn. And they're going to play some other teams that have big physical lines and guys like these Penn State offensive linemen and tight ends that they had to face tonight. You got LSU in a couple of weeks, and even though this doesn't look like an all-timer LSU team, we know that up front, this LSU team has some elite talent. So you've got to address it by then, I think. But, outside of that, I think you've got to also try to just help your guys come back from a disappointment like this. You have to keep the locker room together and make sure that these guys don't start thinking that the solution to this is not what do I do, and start pointing the finger at other people. Tank Bigsby had a great night tonight. Jarquez Hunter had a great night and was a great contributor. Do those guys take it upon themselves in this moment to try and help make everybody else play at an elite level too, or do they say, hey, it's not my fault that we didn't win the game.
Yeah.
I think these are the little moments where leadership comes into play, from the coaching staff to the experienced players as well.
Sure.
And how the team bounces back from a loss like this is going to determine the way the rest of the season goes in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and there's not a ton of time when it comes to bouncing back. Auburn is going to host Georgia State, and then that back-to-back stretch when it comes to the rivalry games, LSU and Georgia. Of course, LSU on the road, Georgia at home, both elite programs historically. Like you said, Matt, a second ago, LSU, not really the LSU that we have always known them to be. But this has to be a positive when it comes to experience levels for guys and communicating with their head coach. Now getting into SEC play, this is really one of those no harm, no foul type situations, because this was not a conference loss. And now now the Tigers going into conference play with an opportunity to have that just in their memory bank a little bit. Hostile environment, they check that box. A top 10 program, they check that box. You know, they have that experience a little bit going now into an SEC schedule.
You know, I said it in a critical way a second ago that I think this team has had some tendencies in recent years to do things that can cost them can cost them the game in close games against teams that are equal to them, sometimes teams that aren't even as good as them. I think, though, that part of this team's DNA also, from a positive standpoint in the last few years, is they have had a tendency, I think, to bounce back well from an early season loss. I think that whatever your opinion is about how Auburn played under Gus, and there's plenty of valid criticisms, Auburn lost plenty of games early in the season under Gus, and then we'd watch them reel off win after win after win, and look at them in November, all of a sudden scaring Alabama, beating Alabama, multiple times. So this team is more than capable. They have shown us in the past, this roster has shown us that just because you lose a game in September doesn't mean that these guys fold up their tent and call it a season. They can learn from it and come back from it and emotionally rebound. And this isn't even a conference game. So Auburn still has everything on the table in front of them if they can learn from this and get better as a result of it.
Agreed. Overall, appreciate your comments tonight, everybody. There's frustrations, but there's also positives. BC Cole said a second ago, we still gave a full game effort. It wasn't always true in 2020, so that is an improvement. It certainly is. Auburn fought for 60 minutes, it felt like, but ultimately falls a tad short on the road against Penn State, 28-20. The final. Tigers are going to return home now to play Georgia State, kind of a tune-up game, of course, before the SEC schedule begins, with a road trip to LSU. So Auburn looking to get back to the drawing board a little bit. First-year head coach Brian Harsin takes his first loss as the Tigers head coach. We will see how Auburn can bounce back at home next Saturday. I'm Simone Eli. He's Matt Scalisi. Thanks so much for tuning into the Auburn Postgame Show, brought to you by Medical Properties Trust. Have a great Saturday night.
Medical Properties Trust. At the very